today's webinar. And it's our pleasure to welcome such a huge number of audience in our webinars. We have been celebrating World Mental Health Day since September through our series on mental health and well-being. Our guest for today is Ms. Mansi Poddar, who will speak on the topic Understanding and Recognizing Complex PTSD. We welcome you, ma'am. Mansi ma'am has earned her master's in counseling for mental health and wellness from New York University in 2009. Later, she has evolved her more traditional technique that has been taught in New York University to more that concerns both mind and body. Mansi ma'am is now certified in narrative practice, and she also has been certified as trauma treatment specialist, cognitive behavioral therapist, spiritually based psychotherapist, anger management treatment provider, and Gottman trained marital therapy. She has pursued a postgraduate diploma in mindfulness and process-oriented psychotherapy. She has counseling experience for over more 12 years with trauma, life transition, sexuality, women's issues, grief counseling, premarital counseling, anger management, marital therapy, and inferiority. She also has experience with various conditions like mood disorder, personality disorder, depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. She has been honored with an award by the SRL Laboratory for her work as a psychologist. Mansi ma'am was invited as a speaker in various social media platforms and has been featured as an expert in several media outlets. Beside her work as a psychologist, she is a freelance writer and blogger where she has written various articles on mental wellness. We are really pleased to have you with us today, ma'am. Ma'am, we once again welcome you to DeepRanjani, and we believe today's session will be a very insightful one. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our organization. DeepRanjani Foundation was established in January 2022. It is a training institute that provides vocational training and employment to individuals with special needs, along with consultancy and OPD services. Now, without taking any more time, I would like to hand over the mic to Mrs. Madhuparna Das Chaudhary, our psychologist and special educator at DeepRanjani Foundation. Madhuparna ma'am, please take it.
Thank you, Olivia. It is wonderful to have you, ma'am, and a warm welcome once again.
Madhuparna.
It's a pleasure to have you and Shivani ma'am with us. And we once again welcome our esteemed audience who have been with us throughout this journey that we had started a year back. So Mansi ma'am, it's all your stage now to take the discussion ahead and enrich us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So before I start, I would just like you to spotlight Shivani, because without her, there would be no talk since I have no idea how to make PPT slides. So everybody Shivani is somebody who works with me. We are co-workers. She's a psychologist and an excellent one as that. So Hi, Shivani. We can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Better?
Yes. Great. So, all right. So shall we start, Shivani? Madhuparna, do you want to upload the PPT slides? And everyone, this webinar is interactive because I want you to have some takeaways as well. So it would be nice if you got pen and paper right here.
Could you say what you were saying?
Yeah, I saw you. You have that PPT on your computer. I think you just have to click on it and share it.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do that. We'll start with the PPT right away.
Great.
Is it visible, ma'am?
Yeah, I can see it. Can everybody else see it? Yes. So is it possible? I don't know how to see everyone. One sec. Okay. Okay. All right. Welcome to this webinar. And today I'm going to talk to you about CPTSD and PTSD and basically what trauma looks like. So if you want to know more about my credentials or Shivani's credentials, we have our website here. We have our Instagram handle. You can just follow us and check us out. Now, can we just go to the next slide and get right into the meat of the content? Okay, so what is trauma? When everybody thinks of trauma, we often minimize trauma and we say, oh, I was so traumatized when my partner left me, or oh my God, I was so traumatized when a car hit me. But that's a very loosely used definition of trauma. Trauma is actually defined in various ways by many trauma researchers and psychologists. I've put down the 4 main ones, and they are too much, too soon, too much, for too long, or not enough for too long. So what this basically means, I don't know why this is so complicated, but it means that trauma can be an ongoing difficulty that overwhelms the nervous system, or it can be a lack of something that should have been there. So for example, it can be a lack of attunement from a parent that should have been there in the childhood. So that's what it means by not enough for too long. The second is body's protective response to something it perceives as potentially dangerous. This means that when we are traumatized, we will have different responses. And I'm sure most of you have heard of fight, flight, freeze, even fawn lately as responses. These are all nervous system responses. And when you are constantly responding to a threat, you are utilizing certain responses and at times getting stuck in them. So that's what it means by body's protective responses. And Peter Levine, who is the founder of somatic experiencing and one of the main people behind the field of trauma, says it's thwarted instincts. So body and mind do not experience resolution. They remain in high activation freeze or immobilization into helplessness or collapse. It feels as if the threat is ongoing. So just to give you a quick example of this, if somebody has been raped by a person in a red shirt, every time many people will develop an association with the color red. So maybe if they see a teacher in a red shirt at the age of 30 or even 40, and they feel their heart rate is going up, there's a lot of stress, their head is getting dizzy, they can't think straight, that can be a trauma response. The body is feeling as though the threat is still ongoing. So there has been no resolution. And trauma therapy's goal is to create this resolution through the discharge of the freeze or the fight energy. Being traumatized means continuing to organize your life as if the trauma was still going on, unchanged, immutable, as if every new encounter or event is contaminated by the past. This is by Bessel van der Kolk, and if you guys haven't read his book, Body Keeps the Score, I highly recommend it. So maybe just write it down as a resource. So what he means by that is, for example, somebody had abandonment issues growing up. Their parents weren't at home. Maybe their parents were too busy. And when they grow up, they have an innate sense of loneliness. So every time a partner or a friend doesn't take their call or isn't available, that might get triggered. And they live as though they are still being abandoned. So I'm just giving this to you in a very, very simplified way. And now to summarize this, individuals with long-term chronic trauma exposure can have an impaired ability to accurately perceive whether people or places are safe or trustworthy. So one of the things I see in my practice and in my own life and with people I know is a lack of safety. The system that defines what is safe gets changed. So unsafe becomes safe. Think of people who constantly land up in abusive relationships. That's familiar to them. And safe becomes unsafe. So a smiling face might come across as something is wrong. Why is this person smiling? It feels off. And it might be absolutely safe. So trauma does break this system. Now, trauma also brings in hypervigilance. I don't know if, as somebody who has been bullied in childhood, in a social setting, I'm extremely hypervigilant. I will go in, I will scan everybody's face. I'm very, very sensitive to micro expressions, micro body expressions, energy, to the point where it can get very anxiety provoking for me. And that is hypervigilance. So when we are constantly looking for cues of threat, so I do this unconsciously as a way to see if I'm safe there. And there's a negativity bias. So trauma also brings a negativity bias towards looking for threat. So even if there's no threat, my mind is such that it will find one. So there has never been a social situation where I've gone and not felt, something is off here. So that's an example of a negativity bias. So I'm going to leave what is trauma over here. Shivani, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would like to add that, the mind stores information. And with time, we may not even know what the mind has stored. So say, for example, as a child, someone used a word and it evoked a certain emotion, right? And it was a not very nice emotion. Later in life, even something very remotely close to the word is going to evoke the same emotion, right? So the body and mind store emotions, they store the trauma. Mansi, back to you.
Great. So guys, I'm going a little quickly with this because there's a lot of content and I really want to make this interactive so you don't feel bored. But this is where I'm going to stop with the explanation of what trauma looks like. I hope it's been clear to you. If you have any questions, you can always ask me. And also feel free to WhatsApp me and I will try my best to send you resources to explain more. So can we switch to the next slide, Madhupurna? So this is a quick one. We got quite a few questions on what is trauma-informed. And you can have a read through of the slide, but in a nutshell, when we study trauma, you learn to view clients through a trauma lens. And I find that this is useful in my personal life as well. I can see the trauma that plays through in my friend's life, even in my children's life. So my son has birth trauma and I can see how that manifests because I am trauma informed. Now, many of you have asked how to become trauma informed. Quickly, start by reading. So if you cannot commit to a professional course, start trauma readings. And you can start with trauma books. You'll find all of them on my Instagram. And I keep uploading trauma articles and trauma books. So that's a good place to start. And of course, seeing a therapist who is trauma informed will help you work with your body, your mind, even your spirit. So did everybody get a chance to look at this slide? Shivani, do you want to do a quick read through of it?
I'll read the second definition.
Sure.
So trauma-informed practice refers to the clinician's understanding of trauma diagnosis and symptoms, as well as the clinician's astute awareness of the unique challenges and difficulties that a trauma survivor may face
within the context of relationships, personal and therapeutic. I think that was quite self-explanatory.
Yeah. So basically somebody who knows what is trauma and how it's playing out in people's lives. So quickly, this is what I had to tell you. So for example, when you're diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, if a person is not trauma informed, they will stick to the label. Oh, this person has an illness called borderline personality disorder. But a trauma informed therapist will understand that BPD is merely a set of symptoms that describes how the trauma is manifesting. But the real symptom is CPTSD. So then we go right back into the history, and the view that we hold of BPD completely shifts. And I've seen that in myself as a clinician. In my clinical training, I thought of BPD as a personality disorder and illness. But after I got trauma informed, I stopped seeing it as just an illness. It was a group of trauma manifestations. So just giving you an example. So Modiporna, can we change the slide? And now we're going to show you Gabor Mate's video on 7 impacts of trauma. Great video, great work on trauma. And I really feel this will be valuable for you. So can we play? This will be the first link that I sent you. Guys, if I made the whole explanation of trauma easy for you, just message me with a thumbs up so I know that I'm landing, because I can't see everybody on my screen. Great.
So trauma comes from a Greek word for wound. So trauma is a constriction. It's a narrowing. It's a diminishment of your emotional functioning, your psychic, psychological functioning. So what I'm saying about trauma is that trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. How many of you had the experience that you had a strong gut feeling about something and you ignored it and you were sorry afterwards? Sorry that you ignored it. Just raise your hand if you've had that experience. Okay, most people here. Now, that's what I mean. That's the first sign of trauma, or the first impact of trauma, is a separation from yourself. Because your gut feelings are the strongest guide for what you need in the world. They're essential. How long would you survive out there in nature if you ignored your gut feelings? You wouldn't. You'd be dead. That's how important gut feelings are. What makes us disconnect from our gut feelings so that they're actually even there telling you and you ignore it? Well, you've been disconnected from yourself. That's the first impact of trauma, is a disconnection from the self. The second impact of trauma is you disconnect from other people. No, you just don't trust others. You just don't trust others. And you feel very much isolated and on your own. So addiction is a very lonely kind of thing. Even if you use addiction to connect with other people, you're using it because you feel isolated. So there's a disconnection from other people, a mistrust, and isolation. That's the second impact of trauma. The third impact of trauma is your view of the world. So how do you see the world? What kind of world do you live in? So how I see the world, that's the world I live in. So if I see the world as hostile and dangerous and untrustworthy, I'm going to have a very different life than if I see the world as basically a good place where there's suffering and there's joy. It's complex, but fundamentally, I belong here. I live in a very different world if I believe that than if I'm convinced that it's a hostile, dangerous world. So trauma distorts your view of the world in a negative way. Number 4, trauma gives you pain. It gives you a wound that there might be some scar tissue over it, but the wound is never healed, actually. So there's pain there. And then that's pain that you need to escape from. So it imposes a lifelong pain. When I say lifelong, I mean until you deal with it. That's the 4th impact of trauma. The 5th impact of trauma is actually on brain development. What trauma actually affects how our brains develop. Children have no self-regulation. So if you're stressed as an adult, if you're mature enough, you can regulate yourself. You can take a few breaths. You can calm yourself down. You can say, okay, slow down. Let me think about this. Let me deal with this. An infant can't do that. Infant's got no self-regulation whatsoever. So the infant's brain requires the mature function of the adult's brain to regulate itself. But what if the adult's brain is not functioning maturely because that adult themselves never got the right conditions for the healthy development? Now you have an immature adult's brain regulating or trying to regulate an immature infant's brain. So that self-regulation never develops. Number 6 is that trauma gives you a shame-based view of yourself. So you become actually ashamed of who you are. Not just of what you do, but of who and what you are as a person. So trauma gives you a shame-derived sense of yourself. That's number 6. And the 7th impact of trauma is it makes it difficult for you to be in the present moment. It keeps you stuck in the past. So you react to the present, or you're thinking you're reacting to the present, but actually you're reacting to the past. And that's an important one because it affects everybody. You may think you're here because somebody in the family's got a problem and you're here to help them. What I'll be telling you throughout the day is that actually each one of us is here for ourselves. There's tremendous healing possible. Is anybody ever really whole? Yes, they can be.
You can stop it now so it won't get delayed. Yeah, great. So that video was excellent, but I should mention that there's one thing that Gabor always says is before we create the world with our minds, the world creates our minds. So that's where a lot of the structural oppression bit comes in. So how we view the world is also how the world has trained us to view itself. So I should mention that. Now, can we go to the next slide after the video?
Slide, please.
Yeah, it'll be after the 7 impacts. I think it's what is CPTSD?
The one before this.
Yeah, number 5. So quickly, you all can read the slide, but CPTSD is complex PTSD. This is, can you bring back the slide, please? It's number 5. Yeah. Yeah. So this is generally childhood trauma, trauma that is very ongoing, very prolonged and relational in nature. So by relational, I mean that it's with your parents or in a family structure or ongoing sexual abuse by somebody you trust. And it involves a lot of betrayal, a lot of developmental conditions that should have been there that aren't there. So developmental trauma is actually what CPTSD looks like. And we also include pre-verbal trauma and trauma that starts in the womb. So if the mother is severely traumatized, the child does experience trauma and is born into a trauma history. So that's what we mean by CPTSD. Anything you would like to add, Shivani?
No, I think you explained.
Great. So we'll go to the PTSD slide. That's number 6.
Next one, please. Slide
Yeah.
6.
So a lot of you messaged saying, how would you deal with PTSD, etc. But when we read your questions, we understood you're actually referring to CPTSD. So we made a quick slide to explain the difference between the two. And this is the one that Shivani is going to talk about. Are you comfortable with that, Shivani?
Yes.
Great. All right. So you can take it.
So as we know that CPTSD is very ongoing. It's just more than one event. It's a number of events over a period of weeks or days or months, right? That causes complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But PTSD is something that happens after one singular event or an event that has happened in one block of time, right? Is that difference very clear to everybody? One is ongoing, one is happening after one singular event. The after effects of both PTSD and CPTSD are very similar, but CPTSD has more long-term effects. PTSD has effects, but not as much as CPTSD. I'm not diminishing the effects of either, but I'm just giving you in terms of relativity. Is that clear? For PTSD, you may have flashbacks, you may have intrusive thoughts, you may have avoidance, you may have differences in the way you're feeling in your body, the way you're reacting to a situation. CPTSD symptoms we'll come to right now, which Mansi will discuss. You'll understand the difference. Mansi, anything to add?
No, I think we're good with that. We can move on.
Next slide.
Yes, please.
Slide 7, please.
Yeah. So we're just going to explain these to you, and I'm sure many of you will recognize these symptoms, but I do invite you to not diagnose yourself with these symptoms just because you have one or two of them. But CPTSD is something that should be diagnosed with a professional. However, I do recognize that we all look for language to express our inner difficulties and pain. So if it resonates, great. And the symptoms are, we'll just go to the next slide and I'll explain everything. Yeah. So re-experiencing, which is nightmares, flashbacks, and you get very easily triggered. So it's generally, you can see that you're re-experiencing trauma if your response really is not in proportion to the event. So I dropped the pencil and you just go this way. That is a huge startle response. And this keeps happening. We really need to look at it in depth. And I'm telling you something very simple. Now, avoidance. So, for example, with me, as somebody who was bullied their whole life, I learned to avoid people. That just felt very safe for me. And every time I'm stressed, I go into my coping mechanism of avoidance. So there'll be days when I won't leave the house. I can meet people in a gym setting. They might say hi to me for years, but I'll never have a conversation because it just doesn't feel safe. Many people will drink or do drugs and move away from the pain. And many people will access their inner self-critic, constantly criticizing themselves. I'm sure you will recognize your own inner critics if you pause and look in. Then there is heightened arousal, which I just spoke about, which is your startle response. And many people, I mean, I see a lot of people who will want to know where the exit is. Okay, so I can leave from here, right? Okay, so that's the door. So they will look around, they will see if the place is safe. If it's a small place, if they don't find exits easily, it can be very claustrophobic or difficult for them. So we can change the slide. Then there is emotional dysregulation. This is a hallmark of CPTSD. It's very, very difficult to cope with daily challenges. Small things might feel very heavy inside. You might have a very deeply huge emotional reaction to it. There are urges to cut, to self-harm through substances. Many people go straight away to a suicidal ideation. And sometimes you completely lose the capacity, the nervous system capacity to feel pleasurable feelings. So you numb out. Many people will describe this as, I'm dead from inside. I don't feel anything. I have no emotions. And it's not just after a stressful event or a breakup or something. It's just ongoing, irrespective of what is happening in their lives. Then there is disturbances with self-organization, which is identity issues. And the identity can be shifting. So today I feel I'm a neat, organized, productive person, but next week I say, oh, I'm a creative mess. There's a confusion in the identity, and I'm really simplifying this down. And feels ineffective or powerless, has little hope for the future, feels ashamed, guilty, unworthy, believes they're damaged, has a hard time finding a sense of purpose to life. Anything you would like to add, Shivani? Because I think we're running out of time, so I'm just going a little fast.
I talk about dissociation. I think that comes in the next slide.
Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Yeah. Would you like to discuss this slide? Interpersonal problems, which is, yeah.
All right, so like we even watched in the video, Gabor said that we have a separation from self, right? We have a separation from reality. When the event or the series of events that have happened are so traumatizing for the mind dissociates. It just cuts away from the perception of reality. Now, this can be a survival mechanism, I need to survive, or it can be a psychological protective mechanism. Right? So you'll see sometimes we're just staring into space, not thinking anything. There are people around us, but we're not being able to connect. That's one example of dissociation. The definition is given on the slide. Please go through it. Mansi, anything to add?
No, I think we are good with this. People, if you have understood CPTSD now on a deeper level than you knew before, send us a heart or something like that so we know that we are getting through. Thank you, Rachna. That was cool. All right. So, yeah, I can see many hearts. I don't know if we can email you the slides, but I'll find out from the organizers if that's a possibility. Maybe we can send everyone the slides so you can read through them in your free time. And can we go to the next slide? We have some really cool things, so I'm trying to quickly get there. All right, so, you know, I changed my mind around this. I would like all of you to first do the attachment test, okay? So can we go to the slide which has the attachment said, Madhupurna? I think it'll be after this or after that.
Check.
Yeah, it'll say the test. And I'm going to WhatsApp you the link so you can put the link up.
Can you tell me the heading, please, which has the relevant topic?
Take the test, the attachment test. You'll find it.
Just take your own test.
Yeah.
Can we have the attachment test slide, please, having the heading attachment
the next
test?
slide.
This one. Yeah.
This one?
So you all can log into this. Can somebody just type this in the link box so everybody can, oh wait, let me type it. Yeah, I can't even type it. Okay, so can somebody just type traumasolutions.com/attachment-styles-quiz and just take 2-3 minutes and do this quiz. It'll be quite revealing. And it's absolutely a legit quiz developed by Diane Heller. She's a researcher on attachment theory, done excellent work with attachment, and has developed this free test for people to get started on the attachment styles. And once you're done, we'll give you about, I think 5 minutes is enough. Yeah. So if you're up for sharing, you can put it in the chat box, what came up for you. If you're finished, just raise your hand so we understand how many people are done with it. And if you guys can, just put on your camera so we can see you. Because most people have switched off their cameras. So it'd be nice to see your faces. Activates the social engagement system of the nervous system for everyone and creates safety. Great, I can see many more people. It feels nicer. Oh, I don't feel like I'm talking to a wall anymore. Yay. So if you've done your test, just raise your hand. Anybody want to share the results or you feel uncomfortable?
Someone in the chat says that they haven't taken the test, but they already know their attachments.
Oh, excellent. If you're comfortable, just type it in the chat box. And if you haven't taken the test yet, you can just copy this link and take it later on. But don't let the content influence your answers. All right, so Madhuparna will quickly go back and just discuss attachment styles very quickly.
Slides for the attachment styles?
Yeah.
Previous slides.
Yeah, 2 of them.
We'll just tap them.
Yeah. So
This is the one?
Yeah, these ones. Yeah. So we've simplified the attachment styles. It's really not that simple. because attachment styles can be blended states as well. So you can have anxious avoidant or disorganized and avoidant. So it gets a little complex, but for simplicity's sake, we've put 3 of these. And disorganized attachment generally occurs when the parent is not hot and cold. This parent is very nice to me, but the next minute this parent is a threat. So the child is always confused growing up. This is not regular parenting where the parent is scolding a child for doing something. This happens on a very daily basis. The child grows up feeling threat, but has no escape, so attaches to the parent and then goes from idealizing the parent to de-idealizing the parent. And then there is, Shivani, do you want to take this on, anxious attachment?
Yeah. So when there is a parent who has been a source of alarm or chaos for the child, then the adult adapts by becoming either overly dependent or suffers from abandonment anxiety. Right? I want to be close, but again, how do I be close to this person? Like there's this need to survive also. That's for anxious attachment. What about avoidant attachment, Mansi?
So avoidant, to put it simply, is when we avoid human companionship. I'm getting too close, so I pull back. And many of you will find this in a lot of people you've probably dated. You know that, oh, I felt things were going really well. What happened? They suddenly pulled back. And they don't explain that, and because they themselves don't understand what happened. But it can be avoidant attachment. So that's what it looks like. Now, can we go to the next slide?
Consistency has been a concern.
Sorry?
Consistency of being there for the child has been a concern.
Yeah. And if we're talking about CPTSD, it's very important to understand attachment. If you're a psychologist or a trainee psychologist and you want to get trauma-informed, attachment theory is quite a useful theory to learn, because attachment wounding is what actually causes the CPTSD. Cool. So let's go on, Madhuparna. Let's shift. Yeah. So it's not a fixed style. Different people will bring out different parts of you. It's almost like a circle, 20% secure, 30% avoidant, and each person will, so maybe you feel really good with someone, but you don't feel good with somebody else. And that's important to note, that it's not a fixed style. And this is a strategy that helped the child survive a very difficult childhood. So if a child avoided a difficult parent, they learned that I could be safe. So the core of CPTSD is safety or a lack of it. And we can develop different attachment strategies within different relationships in adulthood. And neuroplasticity reminds us that we continue to be shaped by our ongoing experiences, helping us develop new relational expectations. Simply put, you can change your attachment styles depending on the relationship. So if you find somebody who offers you a very secure attachment style, which is a healthy attachment style, you're there, you're communicating, you feel safe in the relationship, you help the other person feel safe. The person who might have a slightly trauma-based attachment style or an attachment wounding might find healing through this. And this can also happen in a therapeutic relationship. So that's the bit on attachment theory. Now, I feel like we're just running out of time and I'm getting stressed out totally. So can we move on? Yeah. So this is a quick study which Shivani is going to talk about, the history of the ACE study.
All right. So firstly, ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. Okay. These means experiences that have been really hard or traumatizing for an individual. Now, this study came about by Dr. Felitti. Am I getting his name right? Felitti. Okay. So he was a doctor who owned a chamber for weight loss. So he realized that individuals who weighed 300 pounds and have lost 100 pounds are dropping out of his program. So he didn't understand what was happening, because if I'm getting the result I want, why would I drop the program? So in one interview with a patient, he asked the wrong question. He asked, how much did you weigh when you were sexually active for the first time, instead of asking how old were you when you were sexually active for the first time. And he didn't realize that that question actually opened doors for him, where he realized these people had been sexually assaulted by either a family member or someone close to them, and those events were so traumatizing for them that the weight that they had gained actually provided safety. They felt safely invisible with the weight. So when they lost the weight, they were not liking it, and their bodies were not accepting it. So they would drop out of the program and go back and regain that weight. Now, with time, they came up with other factors, which is on the next slide, that add to the ACE, or the experiences that a child can go through in childhood, which are really, really traumatizing.
Can we shift the slide? Yeah.
Yes.
So have a look at this. And I think this is the updated one, which has race. Okay, no, this one doesn't have race and racism, etc. But just have a look and see what your ACE score might be.
So a score above 4 is generally considered like a borderline, where it's high. It's moving towards the higher side.
Anybody want to share the ACE score? I really want you to start thinking about how these experiences might be impacting your physical health or impacting your relationships, how you show up in the world, because this is what trauma, probably relational trauma, looks like, a lot of it. Yeah. See? 1, 3, 3, 5, 7, 1, 4. You can find the ACE questionnaire online also, just Google it. There is an updated one that has social systems as well, but I don't think I could find it. So I've kept the basic one.
Can we go to the previous slide one? So if you see, look at the second point, 4 or more ACEs significantly increase risk for lifestyle factors and health risk factors.
Yeah. The ones who are saying 1, good on you. You score. I'm not used to low scores at all. So this is actually like, wow. All right, so we'll move on. And this is the second part, and this is a little more interactive, but we're not going to put you in breakout rooms and make you talk and all of that. These are questions I want you to reflect on for yourself, because when we start the healing journey from trauma, it's not as simple as the slides make it out to be. That's a disclaimer. It's very up and down and up and down and back and forth. And at times trauma becomes their identity. So it's very hard to shake it off. And we all do go back to our coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms. But this is a good place to start asking these questions of yourself. Do you focus on your health? Do you make time for rest and relaxation? Do you have social connections or spiritual practices? Do you have a sense of optimism for the future? What CPTSD does is really, really make people feel like life can never get better. It's very limiting. And do you have goals? So just small basic questions to look at.
Something I would like to add here is the intention of the practice. Say I am taking care of my nutrition, okay? But if I'm going to deny my body of carbohydrates because if I'm on a keto diet, right? But my nervous system and my body require that. right? So setting intention for these resources and these factors are also important. Maybe we'll come to that towards the end.
So these questions, Shivani got up a great point that intentionality is important. For example, we don't want to use spiritual practices for spiritual bypassing, which is, oh, I'm feeling upset, but I don't want to acknowledge it, so I'm just going to meditate or do yoga to get away from it. So that's really important to mention. And this is something that we do explore in therapy, that, can we be intentional to create a plan for healing versus bypassing the pain and trauma. So can we go to the next slide, Madhuparna? Yeah. So we don't talk about this enough. And a lot of people ask me this question, that how do I know that healing is occurring and I'm feeling better and the trauma is no more completely ruling my life, my relationships, and my brain? So these are some of the factors that come up when you do start a healing journey. And again, I mentioned you might go back. It doesn't mean that it's not working. Rani, do you want to quickly read through it?
Post-traumatic growth can show up in different areas. Like we can discover our strengths. We can enhance our interpersonal relationships, increase willingness to ask for and accept help, increase willingness to be vulnerable, increase recognition of social supports that had previously been ignored, increase appreciation of life, increase ability to take it easy, newly found interests or passions, spiritual discovery. Anything that anyone else would like to add?
Anything personal they would like to add? What occurred for them once they started to go on their healing journey or started feeling better? Yes, Rachna. Shall we you unmute yourself?
It's quite simple, but being able to wake up early, being able to wake up, getting out of bed, or just being able to concentrate, listen carefully intentionally, and very simple things where being able to practice mindful eating rather than stress eating. Yeah, small things. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
All
yes,
right.
Pala, please add. Oh, sorry, Mansi. There's someone on the
I
chat who wants to add.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
To let go. Oh, great.
Yeah, I would like to speak on this. Basically, I am actually studying, I'm basically a PhD student, and I am recovering from narcissistic abuse. And certainly what I feel is pain has its own purpose. You find purpose through pain. And whenever you are under crisis, that's the first step to recovery. I never thought that what I was feeling throughout the years, that time heals everything. But time doesn't heal every wound. You have to proactively engage into certain things, and you have to go out of your comfort zone. For example, I am very fearful of rides. I'm very fearful of certain things like speaking publicly. But right now, I'm proactively engaging myself into certain activities which I felt I couldn't do it before. And those simple activities can boost your self-confidence. It can boost your self-esteem, and you feel that you are growing. That's what I feel is post-traumatic growth. That's where you feel that you are healing. Even in simple activities you were actually fearful of, that's how you gain confidence. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for adding that. I mean, and for speaking up. I know it's not easy to public speak before this talk. I think me and Shiva are nervous, and so you really, what you're talking about is neuroplasticity. So by doing this, you're changing your brain to not be so scared. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing this.
Thank you.
Most importantly, I'm so sorry you experienced narcissistic abuse. It is extremely traumatic.
Yeah, I know. But I am healing, and I'm at a greater place than before, at least. Yeah.
Great. Happy to hear that.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else would like to share what their post-traumatic growth looked like?
I really like the point where she said, how Palak said, not only time, but time and movement.
Hi, I'd like to add something.
Sure.
So I think similar to Palak, I was also in a narcissistic relationship, and there was a time like when I came out of that relationship, I felt like I didn't know where I was headed, and even as I speak right now, I can feel my heartbeat has raised. But it's been almost a year to that, and I feel like I've come such a long way. And I think growth for me has been to take care of myself, to look at ways I can find purpose in my life, and just getting little goals accomplished. I think these have been achievements for me. While I was in the narcissistic relationship, I was so used to not taking care of myself, and slowly that gave me a lot of physical pain. I had severe back issues and neck pain, and for a lot of months I was not able to function properly. But it's been a few months and I'm consistently working out, and that's one of the things which just makes me feel so accomplished. One of the things which makes me feel like I'm taking care of myself, and I'm consistently sticking to something. So I think that's one of the things where I felt growth, and yeah, that's just something I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Ronika, for sharing that.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Mita, I think you have your hand up.
Hello. Good morning. Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. Hello.
Ma'am, I am Anurag Verma.
Hi, Anurag.
Ma'am, मुझे विमेंस डॉक्टर संजय पटनायक हैं, साइकेट्रिस्ट. उन्होंने ऑब्सेसिव कंपल्सिव डिसऑर्डर, सेक्सुअली कंपल्सिव बिहेवियर एंड बाइपोलर डिसऑर्डर डायग्नोज किया है. तो मैम, जो अभी आप लोग डिस्कस कर रहे हो, ये CPTSD, ये उससे एसोसिएटेड है क्या?
देखिए, ये आपको थेरेपी में देखना होगा, बट लगता है कि ट्रॉमा से हो सकता है. शिवानी, व्हाट डू यू थिंक? CPTSD से हो सकता है? तो बाइपोलर, डेफिनेटली.
And OCD also.
OCD, yeah. Okay.
Yes, Mansi.
Thank you for sharing that, Anurag. You brought up a very valid point. Yes.
Actually, I take CBT from one member of your organization, HGTF, from last 4 months.
Okay. So I'm glad. Continue, but also work with your doctor.
Sure. Thank
you. Hi, Dr. Amrita, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Mansi. Yeah. I think in my personal journey with healing from trauma, what the change that I primarily noticed, the narrative of the suffering changed as I was healing, and it looks like I'm standing somewhere almost 13-15 years from there. It took me 13 years, 14 years almost to come up to at least be able to deal with it. And it now when I look back, it feels like a different story. And that is so amazing.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so true. When we start doing the trauma work, the narrative starts to change also. So post-traumatic growth brings in a new narrative of how our lives have been and of identities. Great. So shall we move on, Madhuparna? Yes. So we're now going to be talking about a part of the healing system. This is not the only way to heal, but a large part of what we discussed previously is based on this work, which is resilience therapy and how to build resilience. So there are 6 pillars of what we call resilience, and they are built up of growth mindset, emotional intelligence, community connection, self-expression, embodiment, choice, and control. So ekdam quickly, I will go through this. Growth mindset is mindset that doesn't say, I am right, this is the way things are done. This is how it should be done. It's more flexible. It says, how can we include other opinions? How can I be more flexible in my thinking? And trauma makes us very rigid, black and white. The world is like this. The world is bad. And we're not open to any other viewpoints. So when we start doing trauma therapy, we work on this sort of cognition. The second is emotional intelligence. And Shivani, do you want to take on emotional intelligence?
Understanding and acknowledging what's happening inside of you, right? What's happening in the person in front of you. If I'm acknowledging what's happening inside of me, how am I supporting my emotions through it? You know, we usually have this tendency to suppress emotions. I don't want to feel it, I'll do something else. I don't want to feel the pain, okay? But just knowing that supporting yourself through the pain may also lead to healing. So emotional intelligence works with that. Mansi, anything you want to add?
Yeah, and how we relate to others. I think I would really like to put that, how we are in relationships and how we impact others' emotions too. The next is community connections, which means that you find some community. If you can't find it in people, you find it online, you find it professionally. I belong to a lot of online support groups, for example, for PMDD. So these are support groups that have been very, very supportive. In my life, I can't explain to people what PMS really looks like and how it can be life-wrecking. But in the support group, just one message and 10 people message back, and it's really a supportive space. So whether it's online or in person or even on Instagram, I mean, I have so many people who message me on Instagram, and we do talk occasionally, and they find a lot of support through that, or even in therapy or groups. So just finding some sort of support somewhere. And then there is self-expression. So self-expression is, it can be creativity through writing, drawing, to express what's going on for you inside, your hopes and dreams. Art has the power to move you to a space that is beyond words, you know, and any creative expression, really. Poetry. I mean, I have so many clients who write incredible poetry. They take their trauma and they transform it into poetry, or they write journals. And just something creative can really go a long way.
Can
And
I
then,
just add?
Yeah, sorry, please add.
So why is self-expression important? Imagine this bottle is our nervous system. Our nervous system holds emotions, and we're feeling day to day, minute to minute, second to second. If my bottle is filled up to the brim, what's going to happen? It is going to overflow. The same way, when I'm not expressing my emotions and they keep storing inside, it's going to snowball into other aspects of our life. Which is why to empty the bottle and express your emotions, to express the thoughts, right, is very important.
And I would add that we often think of emotional expression as venting. They did this, they did that, that happened. My father did this, my friend did that. But that is very different. Emotional expression is actually naming and expressing the emotion. Shivani, I feel really, really sad right now. And I just want to share what's making me sad. That is an act of emotional expression. And in this, I'm going to show you the second video. It's few seconds Madhuparna, you can put on the second video that I sent you.
So the second video, please. We'll have it shortly. The second video, please.
There was a study in the States not that long ago that looked at 2,000 women over 10 years. Those women that were unhappily married and didn't talk about it were 4 times as likely to die as those women who were unhappily married and did express their emotions. So the issue wasn't happiness or unhappiness. The issue was, did they express it? Because the immune system is connected to the emotions. When you're repressing your emotions, you're also repressing your immune system in certain ways.
Gabor, welcome.
Nice to be with you. Thank you.
It's so great to have you. As I mentioned before we hit record, such an honor and privilege to have you on the show. You are a living legend. And, you know, as I was mentioning, my old friend Lissa Rankin, who we've had on the show multiple times, speaks so highly of you. So it's just so great to have you.
Thank you.
Let's pause it.
Many of our listeners are likely
Pause
familiar
the
with
video,
you.
please.
Yeah. So that was the bit that we really wanted to show you about emotional expression. Now I should bring in gender. Men tend to not do this. And I find that women quite easily express what's going on. So all the men here, I really, really encourage you to work on this aspect of emotional expression. And can we have the slide so we can go into choice and control and then just lead people into a quick exercise?
Slide, please.
Right. One more goal of, we'll just go to the previous slides. We wrap up the last pillar. The last pillar is choice and control. So when you start doing trauma work, you start loosening the rigidity of the belief. For example, I'm not good enough, or I'm a bad person, turns into sometimes I might do things that don't work for me, or I feel bad versus I am bad. And you have the choice to change the beliefs that filter your perception of the world and shape your responses. And I really recommend that you develop realistic goals for this. A lot of people want to create a change within 21 days. And you are promised all this on the internet, change your beliefs in 10 days, 21 days. It doesn't work like that. It's a very slow process, and it has to include new experiences and your own inner self-talk. So we hope this can send you on a journey to thinking about this more deeply and seeing how you can include some of this in your own life. And lastly, if you have pen and paper or if you have your phone, just pick it up. We'll do a quick exercise before we wrap up. So we'll go to the next slide. Oh, wait, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about this part. So we have something called embodiment, which is a really large part of trauma healing. Without somatic awareness, it's very difficult to heal trauma. And by somatic awareness, I mean body awareness. So we're going to start you on this journey of tuning into your body. And my colleague Shivani, who has a very soothing and wonderful voice, will lead you through this short meditation. So you can close your eyes and just listen to her wonderful voice and don't sleep.
All right, I'm going to pause my video so you can follow my voice. Is that okay? Okay, audible? All right. I would like for everyone to close their eyes and sit back wherever they're sitting. Take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Now, while you're taking your breath in, bring your attention to your throat. Notice how the breath that you're taking in goes up the nose, down the throat, and fills your lungs. And while breathing out, notice how the same breath comes back up your throat and out your nose. You may want to stretch your neck a little to see what that feels like. If your breathing is very shallow, slow it down. In through your nose. Good. And out through your mouth. Rub your palms against each other very gently. And touch it to your throat. Feel the warmth of your palm on your throat. And when you feel that, you may open your eyes. If your eyes are open, you can come back with your video.
So, everybody back? So the purpose of this exercise is to help you tune into your body, because trauma happens in the body. There's no such thing as in the mind. Why is this doing this? Okay. So trauma happens in your fascia, in your lungs, in all your organs. The nervous system is not this isolated system in the body. It is actually a set of nerves, or all your nerves rather, that is connected to every part of you. So when trauma occurs, every part of you is impacted by it. And it's very important to get in touch with the body, because the body stores trauma. And it can look as fascia hardening. Fascia is, does everybody know what fascia is? It's this white covering that covers your muscles, it's almost like a chadar, which is tied around your body. So trauma will either tighten it or it'll dry it out. So just giving you an example, there will be a lot of tension in your pelvic region. Many people have very tight muscles. These are all trauma manifestations in the body. Even posture, even body language, they can all be trauma manifestations. And if you're interested to go deeper into this, you can check out work by Bodynamics. They do a lot of this work. So you can just write it down. So embodiment is important, and you can start your embodiment journey by just simply connecting to your body. I find yin yoga to be excellent for this. You can YouTube yin yoga and get postures. You can do it on your bed and you will see a difference. So can we shift the slide? Yeah. So this is our last activity for the talk. We would really like you to spend maybe 2 minutes just writing and journaling this. This is your personal resilience recipe. Take some time to list down activities that support you physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. What activities can help reduce isolation and help you feel more connected to the community? We are more likely to engage in behaviors that we enjoy. Hence, let us focus on activities that promote our health and give us a sense of enjoyment. So, make a list of 2 or 3 activities that you can engage in more consciously and intentionally to create such sense of well-being.
I would like to add something here.
Sure.
Say, for example, I choose an activity, I want to join a gym or I want to work out, right? But today I wake up and my body is just not feeling it. I'm not being able to even get out of bed, right? Then I need to take a step back and listen to my body. Choose another activity for the day. Come back to the working out tomorrow. See how your body is feeling the next day. It's also about listening to what the body wants.
So once we start trauma therapy and the attunement process to the body, I think we are able to work on this, because many times we do have to force ourselves out of bed, I think, Shivani. So really understanding what is a trauma response and what is, okay, this is actual tiredness. So I think that's important. And this is where we end, everybody. I tried to condense huge amount of material into this small amount of time and all these slides, which was, I think, my greatest challenge. I hope you enjoyed and you're taking home something from this talk. And at least you can look at your own selves and your own life from the lens of trauma. That's my hope for you, that instead of judging yourself and saying, I'm like this, I'm like that, you can take a kinder stance and say, maybe, I've just had a really difficult life, or I've been through stuff, and I'm not a bad person, or I'm not, just kinder to yourself. I think that's the biggest thing. Thank you. And we can switch off the slides.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Can everybody put on the camera? See everybody's face? Because
there are a few questions which are lined up.
There are loads of questions which we will. Okay, quickly. So you sent me that list. So do you want me to answer from that list?
Ma'am, we have the list and we have already covered a few points through the slides.
Yeah.
So let us do the extras, which we can delve into more as we address the questions.
Sure.
And then if we have time, we can again take up the questions and repeat them.
Sure.
What happens if PTSD is left untreated in a child? I would just like to add one more. What are the telltale signs which a layman would try and acknowledge?
So there are two questions in this. One is, you're talking about PTSD or CPTSD?
The question here mentions PTSD.
Okay. So if a child is exhibiting signs of PTSD, acting out, difficult behavior, can't sleep in the night, refusal of food, hitting, scratching, biting, these can be signs of PTSD in children. And if you leave it untreated, it goes on to becoming, the child can manifest any sort of mental illness. It can move towards a personality disorder. It can move towards depression, anxiety, even bipolar. So I would recommend, if you see these signs, it's better to go to somebody. But again, please make sure they're trauma informed and do have some training to work with kids.
That is important indeed.
Yeah.
Ma'am, there's a question. Why don't all people get traumatized even after any severe incident?
So this is a great question. And that's what Gabor Mate talks about, that not everybody who comes back from combat or war zones goes on to develop PTSD. So why is that? He says it's because it's based on the first 3 years of their lives. They had a very secure base. And the way they were parented, the way their home environment was, created a nervous system that had more bounceability. So you have trauma, but you bounce back, versus I have trauma and I collapse. So that's what he talks about. And I've seen that with a lot of people. The first 3 years is very important in a child's life.
So the buffers are active and they are more ready to take up.
Yeah. So what we discussed, resilience. And some people do have a more robust system. They have more resiliency. They can have a bounce back. So it's also personal disposition. It is also support. I should acknowledge is not really as individual as I'm making it sound. Many people have an incredible support system around them. Again, we break in relationships, but we heal in relationships too. So some people do have that. So that's a protective factor.
Taking this question ahead, an extension of this question, how can we prepare the nervous system to deal with the triggers?
This is a very abstract question for me, because the way I look at it is your nervous system is sort of already wired to respond a certain way to triggers. What we need to do is change the way it responds to triggers. We can't technically prepare the nervous system to respond to triggers. So that change is possible, absolutely.
Does that speak of a restructuring, a cognitive restructuring, anything of that?
Sorry, you want me to talk about cognitive restructuring?
How does the shift happen? I mean, does it happen through restructuring or some kind of other practices?
So a lot of trauma therapy is actually somatic. And I'll quickly tell you some trauma therapies that exist. It's somatic experiencing. It can be integral somatic psychology, even Gabor's compassionate inquiry, and brain spotting, EMDR. These are all modalities that work with the nervous system and the body to release trauma. And once you start working with the body, automatically, cognitively, things start shifting for you. So there are two approaches in this field. It's called top-down and bottom-up. Top-down is your cognitive therapy, narrative therapy, etc., where you're using words, thoughts, etc., to work with the nervous system. Then there is somatics, which is working with the body. And these things change how you perceive threats, how you view your own nervous system, what is your relationship with your inside. And both of these things are required for cognitive restructuring.
Thank you, ma'am, for putting it in very simple and excellent way. What is it like about the sense of having boundaries? How CPTSD affect developing the sense of boundary? We have talked about self-esteem, and deeper into this, the sense of boundary.
That's an excellent question and something we couldn't cover in this talk, but I think we did. We put it under symptoms, right, Shivani? That boundary identification, maintenance, and expression is a challenge. So we learn boundaries on multiple levels. There are something internal boundaries, external boundaries, body boundaries. I think a good place to start is just simply touching your own physical boundaries, the edges of your body. This way, just try it. This is your physical boundary. So just getting to know that, your arms, your legs, just touching the outside, that's your boundary. So starting really basic.
Starting from oneself.
Yeah. And of course, boundaries are also based on values, what we are willing to accept in our lives. But CPTSD can make us either have very rigid boundaries, which become walls and we can't connect to people, and we're actually very harassed because we are so boundaried and defended. But it can also cause boundaryless behavior. So your pain is my pain, and I'm going to go all in and help you out because I want love. So that's an act of boundaryless. I feel your pain. I don't have a boundary to my empathy. So you and me are merging. So it's very important to work on boundaries. And boundaries look different for each person. So there's no set format for it.
Talking about guilt, ma'am, people have reported of feeling guilty after they have realized that they have been gaslighted, owing to their expressions of PTSD or CPTSD. So, how to deal with the feeling of guilt?
Shivani, would you like to take this?
So, guilt and shame are two very prominent emotions that come up with trauma. And through therapy, I think, through talking about it, even having a witnessing self to understand what happened in this situation. Is it my fault? Is it something that happened to me? Trauma is not something I caused to myself. It's something that happened to me, right? So through therapy, that that guilt also is worked through a process.
So I would like to add that shame says I am bad. Guilt says I've done something that's not in alignment with my values. And guilt can be an emotion that can be a signpost to what's important to us in life. What would we like to do in similar situations? How would we like to live? So really unpacking the wisdom of the guilt versus saying it's a bad emotion. I don't think of any emotion as bad. There's no such thing as negative emotions. So there's one thing you take is no emotion is negative. I think each emotion is a messenger and each emotion is a very body experience. So working with shame requires very deep work, and shame is I am bad. And again, that comes from a lot of relational trauma growing up. So I'm going to be very frank, I can't give you 5 tips to eradicate shame. It would just not work.
It's a practice, it's a journey.
Yeah. And it looks different for everyone.
Because of the buffers are different. And we fall back and get up. Every process is different from one individual to the other.
You'll never find 2 brains that are the same in this world. So it looks different.
Ma'am, extending from one of the items from the checklist, what amount of contribution does aggressive parenting have to the development of PTSD?
By aggressive, I think you mean physical, psychological, emotional violence.
Yes, a mixture of them, maybe in one direction.
A lot. CPTSD is primarily a result of relational wounding. So by relational wounding, I mean things like this. Abuse in the parental system is one of the greatest traumas that people endure.
Meanwhile, if somebody is ready with questions, please raise your hand. Put on the raise on hand, please, and ask your question by unmuting yourself.
Yes, Rachna.
We can have Rachna.
Yes, so I sort of wanted to know that if a child witnesses domestic violence at home, would she develop complex PTSD? Would she or he or they develop complex PTSD, and continue to have those belief systems manifest in their relationships, friendships, or other aspects of their life?
So if you remember, we did the ACE study, and one of the things was exposure to domestic abuse. Now, it's a very complicated question because we don't know what the developmental factors are around the child and what the child is witnessing, how many times, how the parents are supporting the child after such events. Is the domestic violence also including the child? Or often people cause domestic violence not because of the child, but based on the child. Oh, you did this to the child, you did this to the child, and there's abuse. So it can definitely cause CPTSD. I mean, it's a very big factor in CPTSD, prolonged exposure. But again, not everybody might go on to develop trauma from it, really depending on other factors. It's very individual, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachna. Alisha?
Ma'am, it will be very helpful if you could suggest good reading materials or resources on trauma-informed therapy.
Okay, great. So, do we have everybody's email address or something like that? Then I can send across a list. Or, I don't know not to be markety or anything, but if you want, you can just follow me on my Insta. I upload a lot of trauma books and resources, and you'll find a lot of them over there. So that's possible.
Sure, ma'am.
Mansi, you can
Yeah.
definitely send resources, and you mentioned about circulating this presentation.
Mhm.
We can surely send it to all
Oh,
the
great.
participants.
That
Yeah.
will be very cool. And
Yes,
what
of
I'll do,
course.
I'll make a resource sheet also and send it across to you.
We have Shruti followed by Anurag. Starting with Shruti.
Yes, ma'am. I had a question. I was asking, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I was asking, what are some ways in which narcissistic parenting can cause CPTSD in a child growing into adulthood? Some ways, some examples.
Oh, wow. My favorite topic. In fact, I have a great book for you right here. You might want to get it. If any of you have really struggled with narcissism, this is a great book. I don't know why it's showing upside down, but can everybody see it?
It is in the right direction for us.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. So this is a great resource for everyone. And narcissistic parenting is hugely damaging and one of the major causes for shame. A child internalizes the worldview, I am bad, I'm not okay. A lot of the self-esteem, criticism can come from that part. So just to give you an example, a narcissistic parent might compete with the child because there's no parent-child dynamic. It's often a very competitive dynamic. So mother versus daughter, father versus son. You don't view the child as younger to you or needing support. And outside, the narcissistic parent might appear to be a great parent, really boasting about the child. One thing that is a hallmark is how narcissistic parents will show off the child's accomplishments on social media to you, but they will rarely talk about the child. Who is this person? It's always about what they are doing in the world or what they have achieved. So these are small ways that, narcissistic parenting shows up. But of course, it's not just this. It's a whole host of things that we need to look into. There are symptoms of narcissism.
Anurag, you could put forward your question.
मैम एक्चुअली क्या है ना कि 2005 की बात है। मेरे फादर को सिजोफ्रेनिया डायग्नोज किया गया था। तो उस समय क्या हुआ था कि मैं अबाउट 11-12 साल का था। तो उस समय मतलब फादर को मतलब कंट्रोल किया जाता था, मतलब उनको मारा भी जाता था, मतलब चाचा मारते थे और भी काफी मतलब लोग जो कंट्रोल करते थे। तो मैंने भी मतलब एक दो बार अपने फादर को हिट किया। तो उस समय मुझे ये रहता था कि आज जैसे फादर के साथ ही हो रहा है तो मेरी ग्रैंड मदर रो रही है, तो कल को यही मेरे साथ होगा तो मेरी मदर भी मतलब रोएंगी। मैं मेरे फादर प्रोस्टिट्यूशन के उसमें ट्रैप हो गए थे। तो जिसको मैं हेट करता हूँ, मेरे को पसंद नहीं है, मैं बिल्कुल, बट मैं मुझे कभी कभी ऐसा लगता है कि वो सच ना हो जाए। मतलब मैं ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं हूँ इंसान। मैं सही बताऊं तो मैं फेमिनिस्ट थोड़ा साउंड करता हूँ लोगों को। मेरा बस यही रहता है कि 50% मेल वर्सेस मतलब 1:1 रेशियो रहना चाहिए। मतलब कहीं भी हो, फीमेल मेल मतलब बराबर रहना चाहिए। बट मुझे डर लगता है कि मैं कभी जो मैं सोचता था पहले वो वैसा हो ना जाए। हाँ, तो मैम पूरी लाइफ रियून हो जाएगी। मेरी मदर ने तो जैसे कैसे मतलब कर लिया कॉप अप, पर आने वाली जनरेशन क्या होता हूँ मैम, कुछ बोल नहीं पा रहा हूँ, मैं एक्सप्रेस नहीं कर पाऊंगा।
बात नहीं, आप थोड़ा गहरा सांस लीजिए एंड थैंक यू फॉर शेयरिंग दैट।
जी
थैंक यू। मतलब आपके लिए आसान नहीं है ये सब बात बोलना पब्लिक प्लेटफॉर्म में। थैंक यू।
Shruti Sharma had raised her hand a while ago. Shruti, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. मैम एक्चुअली आई वाज लाइक कि मेरा लाइक भाई है, खुद का भाई है, लाइक ही इज ऑन अ ग्रोइंग पीरियड ऑफ लाइक 9th में है तो वो 10th में जाएगा बेसिकली. तो मैम ही वाज लाइक he developing the sexual thoughts, and whenever he is like seeing me, it is not easy for me to discuss, but I am like I don't know how to deal with that. Like I'm like sometimes getting abused, but my parents are not listening to me. So in this case, what I have to do, because I am not able to tolerate these things. Still, I am telling him it is not good thing to do, but he's not able to think. He's developing these things gradually. In this
Okay.
case, what I have to do? Yeah.
So this is a very intense question and a deep question, and I'm going to be honest. Shivani, you can weigh in on this, but does anybody else have an answer for her? Because I don't know how this works in the system.
I would suggest, because this is a very systemic
Yeah,
change
exactly.
would be required. Why not talk to a therapist? Seek therapy.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to see how you can self-protect and set some boundaries with him. Maybe just at this point, physically trying to avoid him.
Yeah.
As much as you can, lock the room and sleep. If it's possible, sleep away from him. Just small things like that to physically protect yourself.
Yeah. And basically, most of the time, my parents also, whenever I'm trying to say that in front of my parents that he is doing like this, sometimes he's telling, yeah, you trying to get him trapped into this, but I am not trapping. I know that I am not trapping him, but they are not getting trust on me. So how to get like that? Whatever I am telling is like is a trustworthy. They are not trust on me. That's the thing.
Okay, so we cannot give you any advice that technically will make them trust you, because that is something that they have to figure out. And I genuinely believe that you need to contact a professional and see how you can deal with this situation, because I again cannot give you a one-line answer like this.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But thank you for sharing that, and I'm so sorry you're going through that. That just definitely sounds traumatic.
Yes, ma'am.
मेल ने तो फीमेल को एक खिलौना समझ लिया. मैं अपने सराउंडिंग में इतने लोग रहते हैं, मतलब हेल्पलेस हो जाता हूँ. मैं समझ नहीं आता. मैं इवन हूँ पॉर्न एडिक्ट, ऐसे सफर कर रहा हूँ, पर मैं होता हूँ यार.
There was one question while we were doing the activities. Does one do all these activities while not feeling good? This came up when we were engaged in the activities, hands-on activities.
Sorry, I didn't understand. Not feeling good while doing the activity?
While somebody is not feeling good, at the moment somebody is not feeling good, if the person is having those checklists on hands, can the person fill it up and kind of introspect and self-assess?
So
I think this was something which floated in the chat box.
So there is something that we in therapy, in my therapy room at least, we call a trauma trigger toolkit. So we build resources based on your nervous system, your history, and you to cope with what's going on for you. Like I said, we've just given you a few tools in the presentation, but it doesn't mean that if you apply these tools, you will instantly feel better. I think more than anything, it's important to first start naming what you're feeling, to emotionally express, to acknowledge, versus using one of these tools to just bypass it. And if you are going to use one of these tools, like talk to a friend, go for a walk, go watch a movie, be intentional. Then I'm feeling a lot of distress and I need to right now calm the distress down. So I think that is the good place to start. So I think we are out of time. We're already at 4:45.
And one more question, how to differentiate the markers, the core markers between CPTSD and borderline PD?
Borderline personality disorder, BPD.
That's right, ma'am.
So the theory is that BPD now has become a very contested diagnosis, and they are trying to leverage to get it pulled out of the DSM. And they're saying that actually, if you unpack BPD, it is CPTSD. That BPD is just another name for CPTSD. And I think I mentioned this when we started. There's a lot of symptom overlap. And BPD can manifest as the extreme end of those symptoms. And it can be very distressing interpersonally and for the person. So it's somehow got a different label.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So,
just one. Can I ask?
Anybody's there?
Yeah.
This would perhaps be the last question.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my question is basically, if one of your parent, like particularly father, is having narcissistic tendencies, and your mother, on the other hand, is a codependent. So how do you actually acquire an attachment style, whether it's disorganized or over the years you have noticed and you have made peace with your father, and because there was abuse in the initial years, now you are having a very on the other hand, over 29 years you have bonded well with him, and now you are having a very loving and what we say somewhat loving relationship with your father. So how does that impact your attachment style in particular?
Oh, great. I'm so glad. I mean, such a nice question. The relationship has changed. So your attachment, like we discussed, attachment styles it's not a fixed style.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually just, what was that word, Shivani? I'm so tired now, I'm just blanking out.
Strategy.
Yeah. So it's a strategy. So different relationships pull different parts of you. And when the relationship changes to being more secure, which is what it's sounding like, where you both are tuned into each other's emotions, it feels safe, you might pull out a more secure style of relating. So it shifts. It's not set in stone.
One more thing, ma'am, I would like to discuss. It's like maybe in that environment, because I had that stress buffer, my mom was acting as a stress buffer against my, what we say, my father's violent behavior. So I could relate with my father, and that's how I could actually pull it off. The kind of relationship now that I have is actually a loving one. That we can say. Maybe it's because of that, or maybe when you do not have anyone to validate your point, when you don't have anyone to stand by you, then you feel all alone, then you feel that you will be having sour relationship with your father or sour relationship with someone who is a narcissist.
Yeah. So basically, father acted as a resilience factor for you, or resource in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It would have been great. It would have, if we could have accommodated other questions. Questions were coming in flow, and beautiful questions and insights were building up. Thank you, Mansi ma'am. Thank you, Shivani ma'am. And to cast the vote of thanks, I would like to call forward Dr. Amrita Panda, rehabilitation psychologist and founder and MD of DeepRanjani Foundation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Madhuparna. A very sincere thanks, Mansi and Shivani. We all know that talking about trauma is extremely personal, and it can be extremely overwhelming. I'm so happy that we have chosen this topic to conclude the session that we were conducting for last 3 months. And Mansi, the clarity of your explanation, the lucidity of every single concept. And Shivani, your voice is simply healing to everybody. So it's so nice to have both of you. And this wonderful group of participants. It's not easy to talk about the most vulnerable things of life in a public platform. I congratulate you. Thank you for sharing your heart out. And I would request that after this session today, if we can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes of time only with ourselves and not indulging into a lot of humdrums of life. Thank you, Mansi. It's a pleasure that to have you on this particular topic and to have this journey once again, because at some point of time in life, we have done this journey together, and it's my honor, it's my pleasure that you are here today talking about this. Thank you, Shivani. We look forward to seeing you very soon on hands-on and maybe in-person sessions where we can do more justice to the topic and to the expressions of each of the participants. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the DeepRanjani team, for making it possible. Wish you all a wonderful weekend. Sleep well, rest very well after this. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amrita. Thank you. And thank you, everybody who showed up and allowed me to talk about my favorite topic, which is CPTSD, and spread the message that there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe something wrong was done to you. So that's my hope for the world, that we all can treat ourselves a little more kindly and through the lens of self-compassion, and maybe bring that to other people too. The world needs that. So thank you so much for everybody who stayed till the ending. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.